my name's Joanne. Married young to Tom, my college flame, we thought we'd figured it all out. Foolish, right? Fresh out of college, fueled by love and little else, we dove headfirst into life together. But real life? It hit hard and fast. Our tiny apartment was chaos in the form of endless diapers and late-night cries from our newborn, Sophie. I'd rock her to sleep, exhausted, while Tom was out living it up. "Why aren't you home more?" I finally asked him one night, my voice cracking from tiredness. Tom, just back from another night with friends, reeked of booze. "Joe, relax. Gotta unwind somehow, right?" He shrugged, dodging a diaper bag like it was a grenade. "Unwind?" I echoed, my tone sharper than I intended. "I'm here alone with Sophie while you party." "This isn't what we agreed on, Tom." "Jesus, Joe. I'm just trying to have a little fun." He rolled his eyes, defensive. "You used to be fun, remember?" That stung. Sure, I remembered. But things change when you're the only adult in the house. The next 2 years were a blur of similar nights. Tom's charm faded fast, eaten away by his selfishness and my growing resentment. Our final blowout was monumental. I'd just paid off a pile of bills, finding our account drained more than usual. "Tom, we need to talk," I started, as soon as he walked in. He looked at me, wary of my tone. "The bank account's nearly empty. Again. What's going on?" "Oh, relax, Joe. I needed some new gear. Got a great deal on a set of golf clubs." "Golf clubs?" I snapped, my patience gone. "While I'm clipping coupons and you're out dropping hundreds?" "God, you're such a nag." Tom fired back, throwing his keys on the table. "Can't I enjoy my money without your constant bitching? I didn't sign up for this domestic crap." That was it. I knew right then we were done. "If that's how you feel, maybe you should leave," I said quietly, the fight draining out of me. The next day, he packed a bag and left. Just like that. No goodbye to Sophie, no final argument. Just the end of us. Raising Sophie alone wasn't easy. Every day was a test of my will, a balance of work, childcare, and keeping it together so my daughter never felt the hole her father left. I grew up fast, out of necessity. The playful college girl I was disappeared, replaced by a woman who knew how to stand alone. Tom? He sent money, at least. Every month, without fail, alimony arrived. I never told Sophie much about him, didn't want her childhood marred by his choices. She knew her dad wasn't around, and for a long while, that was enough. As she grew, so did her questions about Tom, and they got harder to answer without stirring up old hurts. But I kept things level, never letting bitterness color her view. He was her dad, after all. That respect, that connection, it mattered, for her. Sophie's 18th birthday hit like a milestone. She was already more together than I ever was at her age. Her acceptance letter from a college in the city where my mom lived arrived the same week, setting the stage for a big celebration. "I got in, Mom. I can't believe it." Sophie waved the letter like a victory flag. I pulled her into a tight hug, laughing with her. "I never doubted you for a second. Law school, here you come." The plan was to throw a dinner party, nothing fancy, just family and close friends. And, yeah, Tom. I figured it was time to maybe bridge that gap, for Sophie's sake. I sent him an invite. Didn't expect much, but he surprised us both by showing up. He looked good, which annoyed me more than I wanted to admit. Cleaned up, dressed sharp. When Sophie saw him, her face lit up, and that was worth any awkwardness. "Dad." She rushed over, giving him a big hug. Tom looked a bit stiff, but he hugged her back. "Hey, kiddo. Look at you, all grown up," Tom said, his voice a mix of pride. "And you'll need this. For all your classes and stuff." Sophie's eyes went huge. "Oh my God, Dad, seriously? This is too much." "Nothing's too much for my girl," Tom said, a bit too loudly, like he was trying to prove a point to both of us. The dinner went better than expected. We all chatted, even laughed a bit. Tom kept throwing compliments my way, which I deflected with jokes. Too much water under the bridge for flattery, to scrub it clean. "Joanne, you haven't changed a bit," Tom said as he sipped his wine. "Sure haven't," I replied, dry as toast. "Still don't take crap from anyone, especially not men who think a smartphone can make up for lost time." Tom coughed, almost choking on his wine. "Yeah, well, I'm just trying here, Joanne." Sophie watched us, eyes darting back and forth like she was at a tennis match. I softened a bit. For her. After Sophie left to celebrate her college acceptance with friends, Tom and I found ourselves alone, lingering over the remnants of dinner. The night unexpectedly turned soft and warm, full of old laughter and shared memories. "You know, Joanne, I've missed this, us," Tom confessed as we sat side by side on the couch, our hands tentatively reaching out for each other. I glanced at him, the familiar curve of his smile tugging at my own lips. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but I've missed this too." One thing led to another, and the evening slipped into a night filled with rekindled passion that I hadn't realized I still harbored for him. By morning, wrapped in the echo of whispered promises and dreams, we decided to give our marriage another shot. Within a few weeks, we were standing in City Hall, exchanging vows once more. It was just Sophie, Tom's sister Linda, and us. Linda had always been a rock, even when Tom and I were at our worst, and her presence at the ceremony meant the world to me. "Really proud of you both," Linda whispered as she hugged us after the ceremony. "Make it count this time, okay?" "We will," I assured her, squeezing Tom's hand. Moving into Tom's house felt like stepping into a new life. It was a beautiful place, spacious and filled with light. Sophie was overjoyed about our reunion, and her visits from college were full of laughter and family dinners that I had sorely missed. For a while, everything seemed perfect. But as the months rolled into a year, I noticed something off. The joint account we had wasn't growing as it should. Bills piled up, and the cushion we'd talked about building was nowhere seen. One evening, I decided to broach the subject. Tom was in his home office, papers strewn about. I knocked lightly before entering. "Tom, can we talk about our finances for a sec?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. He looked up, a frown creasing his brow. "Yeah, sure. What's up?" I walked over, sitting down across from him. "It's about the joint account. There's barely enough in there to cover the bills, and I noticed you haven't been contributing much lately. What's going on?" Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, Joe, I didn't want to worry you, but I've been having some money issues lately." "Money issues? But your job," I started, confusion and worry knitting together in my chest. "It's not as stable as it used to be. I've lost a couple of big clients, and things are tight," he explained, not meeting my eyes. "But why didn't you tell me sooner? We could have figured something out together," I said, feeling both concerned and a little betrayed that he'd kept this from me. "I thought I could handle it on my own. I didn't want to stress you out," Tom replied, his voice low. I took a deep breath, trying to tamp down the frustration bubbling up inside me. "Tom, we're supposed to be in this together. No more going at things alone, remember?" "You're right, Joe. I'm sorry," he said, finally looking up at me. "I'll figure it out. I promise." But as weeks turned into months, and his promises of resolving his financial woes remained unfulfilled, my doubts grew. Deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps Tom hadn't changed as much as he claimed. Year after year, the gap between Tom's promises and his actions grew wider. Every month, I found myself managing our household alone, every expense paid from my pocket, while Tom paraded his splurges online like some kind of celebrity. One evening, I cornered him as he was uploading yet another video of himself in a rented luxury car. "Tom, we need to talk about the budget. The utility bill is overdue, and the groceries aren't going to buy themselves." He barely glanced up from his phone, his thumb still tapping away. Yeah, I got it, Joe. I'll transfer some cash tomorrow, okay?" "But you said that last week," I pressed, trying to keep my voice even. And the week before. We can't keep living like this. Tom sighed, irritation flashing in his eyes as he pocketed his phone. You're blowing this out of proportion. Everyone thinks we're doing great. That's the problem, Tom. It's all for show. Friends think we live in luxury because of your damn posts. They don't see me counting every cent, struggling to keep us afloat, I said, my voice rising with every word. Come on, Joe, you're being dramatic. Look, I got you that necklace you always wanted, he said, attempting to smooth things over with a grin. I touched the expensive piece of jewelry around my neck, a gift that felt more like a bribe. I didn't need a necklace, Tom. I need a partner. Someone who actually contributes. Tom's face hardened. I contribute in my own way. Maybe if you weren't so uptight about money, you'd see that. Uptight? Tom, I'm realistic. Someone has to be. I retorted, exasperated. You're living in a fantasy world. These gadgets, these cars, it's like you're trying to prove something. Tom scoffed, shaking his head. What do you want me to do, huh? Sell everything and live like a monk? No, I want you to grow up. I want you to think about us, about your family, not just your next Instagram post, I said, my words slicing through the tension between us. This conversation, like so many before it, went nowhere. Days turned into weeks, and Tom's habits remained unchanged. The luxury facade continued, each new post a slap in the face of our actual circumstances. Meanwhile, I scrimped and saved, cut corners wherever I could. Groceries were bought on sale, lights were turned off in rooms not used, and every small spare amount was squirreled away for emergencies. My life became a continuous loop of managing disasters before they could happen. The day I got the call from my brother Mike that Mom had passed away hit me like a freight train. She'd been living in the same town where my daughter Sophie attended college, and Sophie had been staying with her, helping out where she could. We decided on a modest service. Mom had never been one for pomp, and we wanted to honor her in a way that felt true to who she was. We took the train to her city, and Sophie met us at the station, looking as heartbroken as I felt. The service was simple, just close family and a few of Mom's longtime friends. I looked around for Tom during the ceremony, needing his support, but he was nowhere to be found. Leaning over to Sophie, I whispered, "Have you seen your dad?" She shook her head, her eyes red. "No, Mom. He was here a minute ago." Tom showed up right as the service was ending, just in time to throw a rose onto the grave, but missing the entire ceremony. I bit my tongue, holding back the wave of irritation and grief that threatened to overwhelm me. That evening, we gathered at Mom's house, a cozy place filled with decades of memories. Mike read out the will in the living room, his voice steady, despite the emotions I knew he was fighting. Mom had left the house to me, and her savings to him. It was what we'd both expected. But Tom's reaction was anything but expected. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the wood floor. "We should sell the house. It's practical and it makes sense financially," he announced, looking around as if expecting agreement. I stared at him, my mouth open in disbelief. "Sell it? Tom, we haven't even had a moment to grieve, and you're talking about selling?" Sophie stood up, her face flushed with anger. "I've been living here with Grandma, Dad. This is my home too. I'm staying." Tom waved her off dismissively. "It's joint property, Joanne. As your husband, I'm entitled to half. We should sell and split the money." Sophie's jaw dropped. "Dad, I'm studying law, remember? Inherited property isn't shared between spouses. It's Mom's to do with as she wishes." His face turned red, and he pointed a finger at her. "Don't you lecture me about law, young lady. Stay out of this." He turned to me, his voice rising. "If you don't sell, Joanne, I'm considering a divorce. Think about what that will mean." The room went silent, everyone staring at us. I felt every eye on me. "Let's talk about this later, Tom. Not here, not now," I said quietly, trying to keep the dignity of the occasion intact. He huffed and sat down, muttering under his breath. The rest of the evening was tense, the air thick with unsaid words and stifled grief. After everyone had left and Sophie had gone to bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The man lying next to me felt like a stranger. His greed, his timing, his utter disregard for what this home represented, it was all too much. The train ride home was quiet on my end, but Tom was as chatty as ever. He kept going on about selling my late mother's house, calculating out loud how much money we might get and what he'd do with it. We could really turn things around, Joe. Maybe even get that car I've been eyeing up, take it to Vegas, huh? He said, grinning like he'd already won the lottery. I just stared at my phone, not really listening to him. But then, a notification popped up, a new video from Tom on social media. Curiosity piqued, I clicked on it. There he was, standing in front of a lavish funeral setup, not my mother's simple service. His face was somber, his voice soft as he talked about losing someone so close, like a second mother. The video was slick, his words rehearsed. Over 1 million views. Comments flooded in, offering condolences and praises for his sensitivity. I felt a cold anger settle in my stomach. So, this was why he'd missed most of Mom's funeral. He was too busy playing the grieving son at a stranger's ceremony across the cemetery to boost his social media image. All through the train ride, Tom babbled on about the house sale and his plans. With that money, Joe, think about it. We could really live it up. That car, it's a beauty, ride smooth. Vegas would be just the start. I kept my eyes on my phone, my face neutral, but inside, I was reeling. He was so wrapped up in his fantasies, he didn't even notice my silence wasn't agreement but disgust. When he finally paused, expecting some enthusiastic response, I just shook my head slowly. Tom, you're in for a surprise when we get home, I said quietly, my tone flat. He misread my calm for defeat. That's my girl. Knew you'd come around. It's the smart play, Joe. When the train pulled into our station, Tom was buzzing with excitement, probably imagining himself behind the wheel of a new car. I felt nothing but a resolve so sharp it almost scared me. This was the end of the line, not just for our trip, but for us. As we walked through the doors of our home, Tom was already on his phone, likely bragging about his victory to someone. I let him prattle on as I went to the bedroom, my decision clear in my mind. That evening, after Tom had finally run out of steam and fallen asleep, sprawled on the sofa with dreams of dollar signs dancing in his head, I sat down at the kitchen table with all the paperwork from my mother's will. I drafted an email to a lawyer, detailing everything. I needed advice, yes, but more than that, I needed an ally. Tom's sister, Linda, had always been kind to me, understanding even when Tom was at his worst. It was time to reach out, to tell her everything, and to ask for her help. The next morning was heavy with the weight of impending confrontations. Tom came down for breakfast, unaware of the surprise I had prepared for him. As he entered the kitchen, he froze. His sister Linda was sitting at the dining table, her expression stern and unwavering. From the look on Tom's face, seeing her was the last thing he expected. "What's, Linda? What are you doing here?" Tom stammered, his usual bravado nowhere in sight. Linda didn't waste a moment. "Sit down, Tom. We need to talk," she said, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. Tom glanced at me before reluctantly sitting down opposite his sister. I remained standing, feeling strangely empowered, with Linda on my side. Linda turned to me, nodding slightly as if to say, "Go ahead." I took a deep breath. "Tom, I told Linda everything, about your spending, your demands to sell my mother's house, and your threats of divorce." Tom's face went pale, his eyes darting between Linda and me. "Joanne, Linda cut him off, her tone icy. "You what, Tom? You've embarrassed yourself enough." I've been listening to Joanne, and frankly, I'm disgusted. She turned her full attention to Tom, who seemed to shrink under her gaze. "You haven't grown up at all. You're still acting like a spoiled child. And this house? Did you ever stop to think about what you've actually contributed to it? Nothing. This house belongs to me. I let you live here out of pity. Tom's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked like he wanted to argue, but knew he stood no chance against the truth. And there's more, Linda continued, her voice hard as steel. The alimony for Sophie? I've been the one sending it, Tom. Not you. You couldn't even manage that, could you? I felt a shockwave go through me. All these years, I thought Tom had at least done his duty by Sophie. I was wrong. Tom looked down, unable to meet either of our eyes. Linda shook her head. You're not just a failure as a husband and a father. You failed as a man. I felt tears well up, not from sadness, but from the raw, harsh truth Linda was laying bare. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but clear. Tom, I want the house to go to Sophie. She deserves it, and it's what my mother wanted. At that, Tom shot up from his seat, fury replacing his earlier defeat. I don't care about Sophie. I want my share. If I don't get it, I want a divorce. After these words, something snapped in me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared, my hand steady now. Here, Tom. You want a divorce? You got it. Sign these. Tom's face went from red to white, his rage deflating like a punctured balloon. You can't do this to me, Joanne. I'll ask for alimony. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, bitter sound. Go ahead. Try. You might find our daughter a tougher opponent in court than me. His hand trembled as he took the pen and signed the papers, each stroke heavy with the weight of his failures. Without another word, he grabbed his coat and left, the door slamming shut behind him. After the dust settled from the divorce, I moved back to the city where I grew up and settled into my mother's house. Now, the house buzzed with the excitement of new beginnings. My daughter, Sophie, after graduating college, had gotten married and was now expecting her first child. She and her husband, Matt, decided to move in with me. One quiet afternoon, as I tended the garden, my phone rang. I wiped my hands on my apron before answering, seeing Tom's name flash on the screen gave me a moment's pause. Joanne, hey, I need a favor, Tom's voice sounded through the receiver, hesitant and a bit desperate. What kind of favor, Tom? I asked, my tone guarded but polite. It's about money. I've got myself into some trouble with debts, big ones. I was hoping you could help me out, he confessed, his voice strained. I couldn't help but let out a small, incredulous laugh. Tom, I think you've got the wrong idea. I'm not in a position to help you with that. There was a silence, then he chuckled dryly. Well, I had to ask, right? Anyway, how about we give it another shot? Marry me again, Joanne. We could start over. The suggestion was so absurd, I laughed outright. Marry you again? Tom, I'm not about to step on that same rake a third time. No, thank you. His sigh was audible over the phone. Guess I had that coming. All right then, take care, Joanne. Later that week, I was on the phone with Linda, Tom's sister. We kept in touch regularly, a friendship forged through shared trials with her brother. Joanne, you won't believe what Tom tried to pull this time. He attempted to sell my house to cover his debts. Can you imagine? If I hadn't found out just in time, he might have actually gone through with it. Linda's voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. I'm just glad you caught him before it was too late, I responded, genuinely relieved for her. Yeah, well, that's the last straw. I've cut him off completely now. No more rescues. He needs to learn, she declared, her tone resolute. We talked a bit more about lighter topics, before saying our goodbyes. Hanging up, I felt a profound sense of peace. Cutting Tom out of my life was the best decision I had ever made. The chaos he brought with him was gone, and in its place was a calm, stable life with my daughter and her growing family. Sophie waddled into the kitchen just as I was putting the kettle on. Who were you talking to, Mom? Linda, I replied, watching her settle herself at the table. She was just telling me about the latest drama with Tom. Sophie shook her head, a smile playing on her lips. I'm glad we're out of that mess. I can't wait for the baby to arrive, to start our own little chapter here. Me too, honey. This house, this family, it's going to be filled with so much love and none of the drama, I said, reaching out to pat her hand.